Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 172. It's the 17th of October, a Wednesday here. That's right, back in Melbourne, Australia. Dennis Graff here with Kasper Zalowski on our first episode back since UFC 229 in Las Vegas. And Kasper, what a crazy trip we had overseas for one of the biggest, the biggest MMA event of all time.
Yeah, it was an absolute honor to be a part of it. It's great to be back in Melbourne. A lot of memories, a lot of things to talk about. We will be recapping some of the behind-the-scenes moments. Later in the program, we have a bunch of cheeky guests on the program. Some of the MMA media that made some of the more interesting stories behind the scenes on that trip will be joining us. We've got... Well, we did a bit of karaoke. We did a bit of Backstreet Boys, Backstreet's Back. I'm sure you would have seen that on our social media channels. We've got James Lynch, we've got Hunter Homestead, we've got Anthony Walker joining us at the end of the program just to sort of retell some funny stories, a few lasting impressions, and relive that amazing karaoke experience. Also, some other sexy guests. Bas Rutten returning to the program, one of our favorite people to have on. Always a fun chat with Bas Rutten, so we got to get his thoughts on obviously Bellator recently, Chael Sonnen and Fedor Emelianenko, Ryan Bader, UFC 229, what he thought of McGregor and Khabib and the aftermath and all those kinds of things. Also, Dave Meltzer on the program to discuss the numbers of UFC 229. Eddie Alvarez signing with one championship. That is a huge thing this week in the news of MMA and a bunch of other things. This Brock Lesnar DC fight, how Derrick Lewis and DC fighting UFC 230 affects that. It's a cheeky, fun show. I'm excited. It's good to be back, and it's going to be a fun show.
Yeah, that's it. People coming from all over the world in this episode. Canada, Thailand, America. It's all happening here on Submission Radio. And before we start the show for you guys, a big thank you to everybody out there for supporting us on the trip. We got a lot of really lovely messages, people saying that they enjoyed our coverage, people saying that it's sort of the fight week and the stuff that we were putting out sort of really prepared them for the big fights, and sending us lots of messages saying that they thought we had some of the best coverage out there. And rest assured, every message that you guys sent was seen by me and Kasper personally and brought a little smile to our face throughout the whole trip, and it means a lot to us. And a big thanks to all those guys. I mean, we've got some of them on the show today, guys like James Lynch, Hunter, and Anthony, but also other guys like Oscar Willis, Luke Thomas, just a lot of the guys overseas. Yeah, a lot of the great guys, a lot of the media people. I think there's a lot of criticism that falls on the sort of media game at MMA, but I mean, me and Kasper would be happy to testify that there are some really nice guys in the game, and it was a really, really lovely time spending our time with all those people. John Morgan, Ken, just so many wonderful people. So thanks to them. And also, before we get into the show, a big thanks to our sponsors. The first one I want to mention is Musashi. Musashi, you guys would have seen them at the start of all of our videos. They do a fantastic job. Protein supplements, protein bars. They support guys like Robert Whitaker, who's our local champion. And of course, you guys can check them out at musashi.com. You're very excited to have worked with them yet again on this event, and behind the scenes as well, just fantastic guys, Ross and the entire team there. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for jumping on with us and helping us get over to UFC 229.
And I got to say, they helped me out massively because I was smashing at least 2 of their protein bars every single day. When you have to have 200 grams of protein every day, otherwise you'll waste away and look like Christian Bale in The Machinist. Let's be honest, no one wants to look like that. Got to keep your protein up, and running around doing all these media activities and all that kind of stuff. You need quick sources of protein. And Dennis, you got me onto them. These Musashi protein bars, they had marshmallows in them and a layer of peanut butter. Oh my God, I couldn't get enough. So yeah, if you think we're sexy, all credit goes to Musashi, which of course you don't. But also another massive thank you to our other sponsor, and that was Air Asia. They powered all of our UFC 229 content. You would have seen the lovely ladies of Air Asia at the UFC 229 weigh-ins, so that was excellent. UFC obviously have good taste when it comes to their partners and sponsorships, because, well, they're a world champion, and they stepped into the octagon. They are obviously the world's best low-cost airline, as officially awarded by the Skytrax Awards for 10 years running. What an undefeated streak. They're official partner of the UFC. They fly to 130 destinations. That's a lot of destinations. Like we've said in the last few weeks, you can do a whole bunch of martial arts in other countries if you like. You can do jiu-jitsu in Japan. You can do Muay Thai in Thailand. Go hang out with Chris Cyborg. Tai Tuivasa is there right now. I believe Mark Hunt and the boys are training there, so you can visit them. You can do some Wing Chun in China. Asia obviously being the heaven for martial arts and MMA fans. Eddie Alvarez recently signed with One Championship. You want to go there, you want to see him, you want to see him fight live, you can do that. AirAsia obviously connects you to over 130 destinations across AirAsia. Also, they support rising stars, guys like Jimmy Crute, who they helped get all the way from Australia to America, where he won his fight on Dana White's Contender Series, and now he's going to be fighting at UFC Adelaide, I believe. So, there you go. Massive, massive thank you to those guys.
Yeah, they're all fantastic. And before we jump into the show, just quickly, just want to remind you guys, we're sort of fairly new to Instagram. We try to really give it a good crack when we were over in America, and that's where a lot of people got to see the behind-the-scenes stuff. And I'm talking about behind-the-scenes stuff, things from videos at our hotel, jumping on the Seinfeld slots in the casino, to the extra videos from the karaoke night. Us punching boxing bags, singing, a whole lot of stuff behind the scenes in the UFC media days and stuff like that. So if you guys want to jump on and get more of that information, more of those videos, more of that kind of behind the scenes look, that's at Submission Radio on Instagram, of course. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and the iTunes reviews. It's been a little bit of time since we mentioned them, but we're going to be looking through them again. So if you guys if you enjoyed the program, you have a nice review to leave for us, or a funny review, or whatever it is that you want to put down, leave it in the iTunes reviews. We'll check out and we'll read our favorite reviews in the next few episodes of Submission Radio. So if you've been waiting to leave a review, this is your chance. Jump on. We love the funny reviews. We love them all. We're like Fez from the 70s show. We like them big. We like them small. We like them all. So jump on and leave us a review. But Cass, without further ado, you mentioned we got a return show of Submission Radio. Our first guest on the line, and you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a legend in multiple industries. He's known for his fantastic knowledge and coverage of pro wrestling and mixed martial arts, and his great work from the Wrestling Observer and MMAfighting.com. He is the go-to guy when it comes to making sense of pay-per-view and TV ratings. Dave Meltzer, welcome back to Submission Radio. It is a huge pleasure to have you back. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Very good, Dave. So just to kick things off with the big news of the week, what did you make of Eddie Alvarez leaving the UFC and choosing to sign with One Championship?
I mean, it tells me, One Championship just got a big cash outlay from one of the, I believe it was one of the companies that was actually bidding for the UFC that lost out in the bidding to Endeavor. And they put $166 million into One, so they've got a ton of money, and they obviously used it to get Eddie Alvarez. I heard that he got, I don't know the numbers, but I heard he got a far better deal than he could have gotten from either Bellator or the UFC, so he took it. It's kind of too bad in a sense for American fans because he's an exciting fighter, and he's going to kind of be off of our radar, and also, you know, he was one of the top lightweights, and there's all kinds of great fights that he has had and would continue to have probably for a while. And you know, he's not going to be, you know, whoever he's going to be fighting, it's not going to be as big a names, and it's going to be on a stage that's, you know, they have TV in other parts of the world, but they're not, you know, there's nothing in the United States.
Yeah. I feel like it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, I'm always happy for the fighters to get a good deal. I always want to see them financially rewarded, and it seems like that's what's happening here with Eddie Alvarez. But like you mentioned, he's not going to be fighting the competition that he could have in the UFC, and as a fan, that's just not really as fun and not really as interesting. What do you think it does for One Championship? I mean, this is arguably the biggest name they've signed, if I recall correctly. I mean, a former UFC champion. He had that huge build-up with McGregor. What do you think it can do for a company like One Championship?
One guy doesn't change anything. I mean, I suppose it may help them a little bit in their part of the world, but I mean, you need fights, and fights mean two people, and then you really need multiple because, you know, even if you have like De La Hoya has got the Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz fight, but it's like, okay, you got that. Now what do you do next? You know, you can't really build a company with one person or two people. You need multiple people. And I mean, they have a company and everything like that. And they have fighters that are, you know, have some names in Asia and everything like that. But yeah, it's going to be hard for Alvarez. It's going to be hard for him to get motivated to train as hard against lesser competition. It's just you know, I mean, that's the negative. The positive is that they've got money and he's going to get money and he got himself a good deal. So good for him. But yeah, for us, from the sports standpoint and things like that, as a fan, you kind of did lose something. Yeah.
With the UFC, was it just purely the money that they couldn't match? What do you think sort of led them to sort of let Eddie go? And does this have anything to do with the fact that he had sort of disappointing numbers with him and Poirier that they drew in their last fight?
I don't think that that's it. The pay-per-view number, the Fox number was a huge disappointment. I'm still surprised that a fight that big would do like that. But, as far as, I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think it was just somebody made a big offer and UFC felt that it wasn't worth matching, which is kind of funny because, UFC's got all the money in the world,
Yeah.
They really do. But it just tells you, there is a number where you go like, okay, this guy is not a champion. He's probably not going to be a champion in that division. He's going to give us great fights all the time. How much do we want to go? And I think that one probably just outbid that number. They've let other guys go. They let Rory McDonald go, who was a very promising, great fighter. So I don't know what, I think this is another example that UFC is not going to break its salary structure to keep guys of the Rory McDonald, Eddie Alvarez level that they don't think, it's not like a Conor McGregor, or the few guys or a John Jones. I think that they would go extremely high to keep those guys, but I think that they know their business model is that it's, there's very few real numbers movers, and they're not going to break the bank unless it's a numbers mover.
One of those guys that the UFC let go was Ryan Bader, and now he's sort of the talk of the town down in Bellator. Do you think this kind of strategy can come back to sort of bite the UFC in the butt? Ryan Bader, after leaving the UFC, has done quite a bit for Bellator.
Yeah, but he hasn't pulled big numbers either. I think that if Ryan Bader's deal, would UFC bring him back and put him in a good position? Probably. When the contract is up. Yeah. And the same thing with all these guys. If they go out there, they get a bunch of wins, would UFC bring them back at maybe a higher level than they got? But at the same time, would Bellator try to match it? Because now Bellator has the right to probably has the right in the contract to match the offer. So a lot depends on what happens with Bellator financially. We're in a interesting situation, in the combat sports world with a lot of money in certain companies, but at the same time, there's a moment of truth in the sense that you have to have the fan base to back up those numbers. And right now, Bellator's numbers, on television are struggling. They got the DAZN number, the big DAZN revenue, and that's good for the length of the contract. But then after that, then there's a thing is, okay, is this worth it for DAZN or not? Which is something that, in a couple of years we'll have to worry about. Right now, it's going to be like it is right now for the next few years anyway.
It's good for the fighters because they have more freedom to negotiate, but it's frustrating as a fan sort of seeing these divisions somewhat thinned out with a lot of talks of, hey, let's make a 165-pound division and losing Eddie Alvarez and the lightweight division getting just a little less stacked. He's a guy that I think stylistically matches up really well with Khabib, so I don't think the sun had set on him potentially becoming a UFC champion in the future, but it is somewhat frustrating. But while we're talking about numbers, Dave, obviously we got to mention you reported that UFC 229 drew an estimated number of just under 2.4 million buys. With all the speculation as to what the number would eventually fall on, what did you think of that being the number and sort of smashing the previous record of 1.5 million? Did it exceed your expectations? Was it a little bit under? What did you think of the number being 2.4?
I guess I would say, it's hard because when you have the real big one, you never know how big it's going to go. But since UFC has never topped, 1.6 million before, yes, I was, like Dana White threw out a bunch of numbers like 3 and 3.5 million. So then all of a sudden, when it's 2.4, you're almost like disappointed. But I wasn't. I thought anything over 2 million would be a gigantic success. It's unprecedented, especially now when a lot of the UFC numbers are down to do a number like that. And really, it just tells you. The thing, McGregor is just gigantic. Nothing they've ever had. He's the biggest star they've ever had by far. But the question to me right now is where does Khabib stand as far as a star goes? Did this fight? This fight obviously made him a bigger star, but how big? And we won't know until the next fight. If Khabib goes in there and can do 1 million buys with Tony Ferguson, let's say in his next fight, then all of a sudden they've made not another Conor McGregor, but they've made another John Jones or another Ronda Rousey, and that's always a good thing to have. If that happened. You know, you never know. Amanda Nunes smashed Ronda Rousey and didn't become a star off of it. So you never know what happens until the next, you know, where it really stands until the next fight.
I guess the big thing that the media was really debating leading into the fight and sort of after the fight was how much of an impact using the bus footage and all that, the whole incident was, and sort of getting those numbers up in the promo videos. Obviously, John Malkovich, he did a great little promo video himself where he sort of narrated a more sort of clear cut, you know, this is the best of us is the best. And a lot of people thought, hey, you know, this is kind of a better way to promote things than using the bus incident. But from your perspective, do you believe the UFC using that footage sort of helped them boost the numbers a little bit?
Yeah, I hate to say it. I mean, I would love to go out there and say no, but I think it's very clear that it was a big part of it because it was a lot of what people were talking about. And, I mean, I thought all along it's in bad taste to use a felony to promote a fight, but that's what the public turned out to see. And I have no doubt that made a big difference because those numbers, they were off the charts numbers. If there's off the charts numbers, there's a reason for it. And the reason is what you promoted. I mean, Khabib was never a gigantic draw before. Conor obviously was, but never at this level. And it wasn't like they went around and did press conferences like Conor did with, you know, Jose Aldo or with Nate Diaz, you know, where you could see the hype. I mean, we really didn't have much other than those videos. We had the one press conference, you know, and then we had the week of the fight. But I mean, this thing was tracking huge even before the week of the fight. So it's those videos. I mean, that is the reality. It was a huge part. UFC from a business standpoint, they made the right call. I wish it wasn't, but that's the fan base now. I mean, that's just what they're looking for, that type of controversy.
I feel like the John Malkovich promo, like, it really resonates with us because we're all hardcore MMA fans, but I think to the casual fan, they wouldn't care less about it. And I think that bus footage is what you sort of, for better or worse, what you need to draw in those casual fans and to do numbers like 2.4 million. But here's the question. Obviously, a lot of the success of this pay-per-view had to do with Conor McGregor. Of course, he needed a dance partner. Of course, Khabib sort of was the, you know, the other side of that. But, you know, Conor McGregor coming off that Mayweather fight, having all the momentum in the world, being such a huge star, what do you think his numbers will sort of do now that he's lost? You know, do you think this sort of makes it even bigger because people want to see sort of the return, people want to see him climb back up? Do you think sort of, or do you think this could sort of be the peak for him in terms of drawing pay-per-view numbers?
If he gets some wins and faces Khabib again, or even if he faces Khabib again, coming off of what happened here, I think the number could be in that same realm. I mean, I think in his next fight, it'll probably be back to what he was doing before, but it depends on the opponent. If it's George St. Pierre, you know, or even Anderson Silva, as silly as that fight sounds, if it's a big name like that, I think he's going to do real big numbers. If it's, I don't know who, I mean, you know, if it's Nate Diaz, I think he'll do big numbers, and he's not going to fight anyone. I don't see him fighting someone that isn't going to draw him big numbers. And he's great at promoting fights and everything like that. So, not at 2.4 million unless, you know, it's Khabib and it's even bigger than the first one, which in time it could be. And maybe, you know, and maybe they'll go right to it. But as far as like over 1 million, yeah, I think he's going to be over 1 million for the next fight. And probably, you know, after that, you never know because it's a fight by fight thing. If he gets smashed in his next fight, yeah, that'll hurt. I
mean, you mentioned it. Tony Ferguson seems like a no-brainer for Khabib next, but the UFC, you know, they're in the business of making money. How likely do you think it is that we'll see an immediate rematch between Conor and Khabib?
I think that if they can find any justification whatsoever to do it, they'll do it because that's a big money fight. I think from a fan standpoint, you know, you've got to look at it two sides. They may be sitting there. You know, here's the thing. Conor may not want to fight for a year. So what I could see happening, or maybe not a year, but let's say 9 months, because I've heard some rumblings of Conor maybe in July. That's a long time away. So they could go and do Khabib against Tony Ferguson and then have the winner go against Conor in Conor's return. And then you're going to get a giant fight with Conor against either of those guys. So,
but then there's Ramadan in July, I think. So I think that might sort of, if he wants to fight in July, then maybe it wouldn't even be Khabib.
Yeah, then he may have to face whoever, maybe Nate again, or whoever's up there. There's a lot of different opportunities. George would be giant, but I know that UFC, and George just was talking about like never fighting again. So maybe he's out of the picture now. But I think for the payday against Conor, I think George would fight. But I think UFC doesn't want that, because if George beats him and then walks away, you really haven't accomplished much, have you?
It'd be interesting. Yeah, it'd definitely be interesting to see sort of the way it plays out. The other thing is, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, obviously there's a bit of a rift between Khabib and the UFC at the moment, where his teammates have obviously been pulled from their fights, and Khabib is basically giving him an ultimatum: reinstate my teammates, rehire them, or I'm out. I'm going to fight somewhere else. And you got, Floyd Mayweather entertaining things. You got 50 Cent entertaining things. It's a little bit of a stone cold, Vince McMahon attitude era sort of situation. How do you think in the end this is going to play out? Because we've seen in the past, the UFC, they don't like to be bent over a barrel publicly. They don't like to be strong-armed. And, even we'll remember what happened with Conor McGregor in UFC 200, where they just said, nope, you're off the card. How do you think this sort of plays out? I don't really see them sort of giving into Khabib's, whims, so to speak.
I don't know. It's a tough situation. Dana White said that everything's cool, so I don't know what that means. I think that they can work out. There's compromises to work out. It's so hard, because if you're going to fire Tuhugov, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you fire Tuhugov and then not fire Conor? You know what I mean? If you compare what each man did. And I think that's part of the big problem, is that we've got these double standards, and everyone's frustrated with that. I think all the fighters, everyone just looks at this and goes, the stars can get away with anything, and then the undercard guys can't. And but that's how it's going to be in an entertainment sport. But if you're Khabib, and it's like they fire your best friend for, essentially backing you up, your inclination is like to leave. So, they're going to have to work. I don't know. I think they're going to find a way to work that one out, because Khabib's under contract, and for Khabib to be sitting out for long periods of time over this, it's almost worth it to just go, okay, we'll let the guy fight. Maybe we'll suspend him. We'll do a token suspension of him, and okay, we'll suspend him for 9 months, but we'll let him back, and then please fight for us. There's ways to work around that, where you punish the guy, but don't fire him.
Speaking of punishments, how are you sort of expecting things to play out with Khabib and the Nevada State Athletic Commission?
It sounded like Dana knew what he was talking about when he said like 4 to 6 months and $250,000. That was pretty specific, but I don't know. That's maybe he doesn't. Maybe he was just, it's Dana. You don't know if he was just throwing something out that he knows, or throwing something out that he's hoping for. And if it's 4 months means nothing, obviously, because fighters don't even fight in 4 months. 6 months means a little. A year means a lot. If they suspend him for a year, then it becomes a bigger issue. I wonder. I wonder where all of this. It's one of those weird things where between what Conor did and what Khabib did is really bad, yet it promotes the sport in its own weird way. It does increase business, but it's escalated things to a very ugly situation. It's kind of, like when us covering the sport, it's so distasteful, everything that's happening, and nobody gets punished. You know what I mean? It's a real quandary right now.
It's and just to sort of go completely off topic, you mentioned, fighters not really fighting within 4 months, and I totally agree. If the suspension was 4 months or even 6 months, it wouldn't really mean anything. But just looking at UFC 229, you got Derrick Lewis being thrown in there against Daniel Cormier after just going through an absolute war and getting a comeback win against Alexander Volkov. What do you think about that turn of events? It sort of seemed like a sort of last-minute desperation move by the UFC to have a main event for this New York card.
They didn't have a lot of tickets sold, and it's what it was, and they obviously gave both guys tremendous money offers. Neither guy is going to be at their best or even close to their best for a heavyweight championship fight. So you're kind of, there's a part of me that says you're cheating the fans. You're portraying something as a heavyweight title fight, but you're having two diminished fighters, one who's too injured to be at his best, and also short training camp, and the other who just got beat up. Even though he won the fight, the fact is he took a beating in that fight, and probably from a medical standpoint, I question whether he should even be fighting. They cleared him, but I don't know what that means. Because it's, I mean, he was in, there were times in that fight where he was close to being finished, and now coming back in just a couple of weeks. So from a business standpoint, they needed something. They were desperate. They pulled out a desperation card. Obviously, John Jones and Gustafsson, for whatever reason, they couldn't move up because that would have been a lot better. Neither of those guys have fought recently. Neither of those guys have the injuries Cormier has. But for whatever reason, Cormier will do them the favor, and perhaps Gustafsson and or Jones, or maybe just Jones, wouldn't do them the favor. And they knew that, that's how it all turned out. They didn't have a lot. They didn't have a lot of options, obviously. I mean, what they were doing, the idea of Valentina Shevchenko and Nico Montano, that was going to flop horribly. And with Poirier out, before we go, well, you could just go with Diaz and Poirier. You're going to have a great main event, even though there's no title at stake. But now Poirier's out, so you don't even have that. You do got Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman, which is a good fight. I mean, it's a good number 2 fight on the card. But yeah. It's UFC was in a tough position, and we're getting, as fans, we're going to get 2 guys who are diminished, not in their best shape, fighting for the heavyweight championship on short notice.
And I guess here's where things get interesting, because this feels like somewhat of a stepping stone fight before Daniel Cormier theoretically faces Brock Lesnar, right? Sometime early next year. But And I think most people would have Daniel Cormier as the favorite and would pick him against Derrick Lewis, understandably. But Derrick Lewis has a way of just winning fights that you just never expect him to win and having these crazy comebacks. Do you see a scenario, an almost hilarious scenario, where these plans get completely derailed? Derrick Lewis somehow beats Cormier, and he's already been stripped of the light heavyweight belt, and now we don't really know what to do with him. What happens with this Lesnar fight? Do you make Derrick Lewis versus Brock Lesnar? Do you make Lesnar versus DC anyway? How do you see that situation playing out?
That's a lot of moving things. I think that the idea would be Derrick Lewis against Brock Lesnar, which would be, an interesting fight. I mean, it's a scenario. I think that Lewis is a low percentage, but it's not so low that it can't happen, because all Cormier has to do is have a short lapse and get hit once when you have a big heavyweight like Lewis, or miss a takedown and land on the bottom, because Lewis on top is scary. He can finish anyone if he can get in that position. Now, can he get in that position with Cormier? I think it would be a low percentage with Cormier at his best. But if Cormier is not at his best, and we know he's not going to be, that ups the percentage. I think that there is a possibility of Lewis winning. I think then you go with Lewis and Lesnar. But we'll cross that bridge. It's a risk making this fight, because it's almost like why sacrifice the build for Cormier and Lesnar for this risk? And even though it's probably better than 50%, we know about the fight game. It's every fight's a roll of the dice, unless it's just there's certain guys stylistically where we know it's probably not a roll of the dice, but Lewis hits hard enough to where you can never completely count him out.
Yeah. And from what we understand, Lesnar doesn't actually have a bad agreement, though. So as it stands, there's nothing more than sort of a verbal agreement. Do you think there's any chance that the fight doesn't actually happen and Lesnar just ends up staying with the WWE, or are you pretty certain that it's pretty much going to go down at the start of next year?
I think that Lesnar's going to fight, even if it's not Cormier, it'll be John Jones. I think he'll get one big money fight with one of those 2 guys, if not both of them. If he were to beat Cormier or to beat Lewis, and then he would have John Jones, I could see him getting 2 fights next year that would be big. So, I see Lesnar probably fighting unless he just goes into camp, gets hurt, can't do it. But otherwise, I see him fighting, yeah.
Well, it's going to be exciting times. I think in some ways UFC 230 kind of makes things a little bit more interesting, just in terms of how it affects this Lesnar fight. Is it going to be DC? Is it going to be Lewis that Lesnar ends up fighting? And obviously this whole fallout from UFC 229 that sort of keeps giving, with Khabib having his battles with the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Dave, we could chat to you for hours, but we'll let you go because we've been greedy with your time. Make sure to follow the man on Twitter at Dave Meltzer, WON. Of course, subscribe to the Wrestling Observer newsletter for all your MMA and wrestling news. Dave, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys. Well, this is always a very, very special treat for us here at Submission Radio. Our next guest is an MMA legend, multiple king of pancreas, former UFC heavyweight champion, UFC Hall of Famer, of course. He's a Hollywood star as well, and he joins us back here on the program. El Guapo himself, Bas Rutten, welcome back to Submission Radio. It's great to have you. And in video, we love having you in video, man.
It's amazing. As long as the light is bright on my face from the front, I don't look that old.
Yeah, well, man, you always look great, but it looks like you got studio lighting. There's a lot to talk to you about, obviously, before we get into the craziness of the past couple of weeks. We saw, and this is a personal favorite of mine, it was the 10-year anniversary of the Men's Room with Bas and Jeremy, the classic GTA 4 TV show. I used to play GTA 4 and just sit there watching TV, you doing your thing with that Jeremy guy. It was a massive deal to be part of the game. What kind of memories do you have from doing it and recording that?
I had great memories. So first of all the fighting you see in the game is me too. Wow. And we changed the game. We changed, and I mean to change the way, how you saw it, what is the name? With all the little balls, motion cap.
Oh, yeah.
The motion cap. So what happened with the motion capture, normally you just hit the air, right? And that's they capture that with all these little balls, and that's how you fight on the street. But I told them, I said, guys, that's not really what you need to do, is let me hit something. Because I'm telling you, if you're going to see that and I connect with something, you see the power coming back. I said, we brought some focus mitts and some tie pads. So my friend was holding it up, and we were doing it first without, and then we start hitting, actually connecting against things. They freaked out, man. The difference, if you see it is so cool. So if you see some guy getting carjacked, that was myself and my buddy, Amir Perez, doing that as well. At the end, I had to do that crazy in the men's room thing. And man, it was so funny to write a script for that. I broke the sentences up like in places where you should not break them up. So it sounded really psychotic. And dude, it was so funny because these guys started laughing so hard all the time, and they messed up our takes. So guys, you got to go leave the room, because I can't do, if you do this 5 times in a row, then it doesn't come natural anymore. You gotta let it be completely psychopathic. And it happened. They went out, and then we did it. Dude, it's so funny when I start shouting at the audience, "Who wants the knife fight with me?" In the audience.
Yes.
Completely crazy.
Oh man, that was one of my favorite parts. If people, I know it's on YouTube, so if people haven't checked it out, watch it. It's like a TV show, but it's animated, and it's like an animated version of Bas and some guy. It's hilarious. But that's crazy that you did all the motion capture for the fighting in Grand Theft Auto 4. So pretty much everything you see Nico Bellic do, you did that. Were you hired on to do the motion capture for the fighting, or to do the men's room, and that's something that they added last second?
No, they had both. They said, would you like to do the motion cap? And then we have a great idea. We want you to have like a part on the TV. You have a TV show in the game. If you go to the safe house, you can zip through the channels. That, to me, that's like saying, because I have no clue about video games. But I say, hey, anything, man. I love to do that stuff. So, yeah, I had an enormous good time. It's one of my best works, I always say, because it really sounded completely that I was a psychopath. It was hilarious. Waking up in the middle of the night, covered in blood, and have no clue what happened, like that. What the heck? Oh, man.
They have to bring you back. They have to bring you back for GTA 6, man. I'm telling you. I think that's going to push an extra 1 million copies off the shelf, because it's unbelievable. We also have to compliment you on your great job that you're doing commentating for the PFL. Another great weekend of fights. Tell us, what were some of the highlights for you from that weekend? Because there are a lot of pretty cool finishes. To tell you the truth, I just watched, let me see. Go over the fights. Tell me which fight you want to hear first. Because I watched Fedor. I watched Mitrione with Vader. Yeah, just before we get into those fights, I mean just the PFL, because the PFL had a great event. You did a great job commentating that event. So I'm just curious, before we get into those other big fights, how was it for you doing another PFL event? And also, what are some of the highlights for you?
Pretty much everything is a highlight. Man, these guys fighting twice in one night, I never did that. I wish I would have done that at least, or 3 times for the 8-man tournament. It was so cool, And for these guys to do that, first fight is 2 rounds, second round is 3 rounds, because apparently by law, you cannot have more than 5 rounds in one day. So that's why I had to do those rules. They took the elbows out because nobody wants to get cut before the big finale, which is December 31st in Madison Square Garden. But to see guys like Josh Copeland, right? That was last week. That was in New Orleans. But this is the perfect example that, ranking is just a number. He was the number 8 seed. This guy, he had 2.5 months to go to the show of 2 weeks ago. So to fight 2 fights. He said, you know what? I finally got some money. I'm getting a nutritionist, and I'm going to watch my food and all the little things that I do wrong. I'm going to work really, really hard on it. Dude, you saw this guy come back. It was insane. It was a complete new guy. He lost a whole bunch of weight. He was head movement, in and out movement. His punching speed was faster. Didn't stop, but beats Barroso, who was the number 1 seed. Then he goes on knocking out Alex Nicholson in the second fight, and now he's going to the finals. This guy was placed last, and he was only in because a fight went to the distance. If that fight would have gone to a finish, he wouldn't have been on in the playoffs. So now he's in, just got lucky to get in, changed everything about himself. And he looks really awesome. Now he has another 2.5 months. I can only imagine what he's going to do in those 2.5 months. If he makes another growth spurt like he did, he might win the whole thing.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, just on a side note, it's pretty good seeing Kevin Hart doing promos for the event. I know Dennis is a massive, massive Kevin Hart fan. What did you think of them and sort of him getting involved in the company?
It's really good. He's one of the money men also, right? He invested also for what I understand, in the Professional Fighters League. And what about, did you see last show against Vinny Magalhaes? Did you see what he did?
Yeah.
I mean, this guy has 4 fights, and I don't think he went over 6 minutes of fight time in total. I mean, he like I said, he fights like he's double parked. He has to get rid of it over, and then he goes out. So really amazing, pulling off a flying triangle. And then from the triangle he went for a Kimura. I mean, the guy is unbelievable. And also what he said is, I put the hard work in, Bas. The last 2.5 months, because they all had 2.5 months since the last fight to get ready for this. He said, I took 2 Sundays off. That's the only thing. For the rest, he trained every single day, and most of the time, twice a day. Took only 2 Sundays off in 2.5 months. And there you go, man. You put the work in, and you see the result immediately. He has a big chance of winning that $1 million.
That's what I love about the PFL, actually, because you get to see a lot of these names that we've sort of grown to love. And now they have like a new added motivation. It's kind of like they're in charge of where they go. And if they put in the hard work, we're seeing all these guys sort of make it again to that next level and have a sort of a second life. So I absolutely love it. PFL, everybody has to check it out if you guys haven't checked it out in Australia. Of course, Bas, doing an amazing job commentating it. But let's talk about some of the other big fights, because UFC 229, I mean, it's been over a week since UFC 229. We've just come back from Las Vegas. We were in the middle of all the craziness, but the whole time it was happening, we were wondering, what does our friend Bas think of the fight? What did he think of Khabib's performance against Conor McGregor? It was an excellent performance. A lot of people really giving Khabib a lot of credit for it. What did you think of the actual fight and the way Khabib did against Conor?
I think it was phenomenal. I mean, he rocked him a few times also on the feet. And then, we knew that once it goes to the ground, although I was impressed with Conor's takedown defense in the beginning. It worked well on the ground also, the way he tried to shut him down. But, with Conor, once he got tired, then we see the repetitive thing. I think if you really push him and you constantly work him, it's an area where he's not really comfortable. And if you're not comfortable somewhere, well, you get tired faster. And that's exactly what happened. But, Khabib was just all over this place. I mean, his striking, everything looked good. His takedowns, he did a phenomenal job, left and right. I mean, there's not one thing that you can say bad about him. I thought that if Conor was able to land a shot, that could be trouble, but he couldn't land it. Maybe he landed a shot here and there, but not a full punch shot. And Khabib hit the harder shots than Conor hit him. So that was super impressive. And then the way to finish it, yeah, I thought it was an unbelievable fight. I did a phenomenal job. I think this guy's going to be very hard to beat. And in the aftermath, of course, this is, everybody talks, I said, okay, first let's say this. It shouldn't have happened. It's wrong. I know that. It's all wrong. It should not have happened. I'm not for it. Not at all. But I can totally get it, right? Well, we're all human. He's been taking insults for the last 6 weeks, 2 months. Every day, he decided not to say anything back. Yeah, a little here and there. But you know what it is? That's a drop in the bucket. And it keeps on going, and it keeps on going, and it keeps on going. And then after the fight, finally the fight is over. They're finally unloading. And then the coach from McGregor starts saying something to him. That was the drop that made the bucket flow, right? As they say in Holland. And I think he just lost it at that moment. Then everything came back. You know, all the insults about his family, about his religion, about his country. You know, there's a lot of things. And everybody says the same thing, you know. It's not, but people go to me and go, come on, boss, you can understand it. I say, you can't understand that? Of course I can understand. Everybody's human. What, he's a machine? He doesn't get affected by it? Of course, everybody. If somebody starts about my family and, you know, and my religion and in the country, oh, these stupid people from Holland, and it's constantly going, and your friends are terrorists, and it just keeps on digging, eventually, yeah, you're going to hit the snare somewhere. You know, and then when the moment presents itself and they keep on going after it, yeah, I can completely understand it. Should have never happened? Of course not. I'm not for it. I'm not saying it's good. Absolutely not. But I can understand it happened. That's the only thing I'm saying.
So I guess sort of looking at what's next for Khabib, not in terms of fight, but do you think there should be any kind of punishment? Because at the moment, the Nevada State Athletic Commission is still withholding his fight purse. There's going to be some kind of hearing you got to expect. What do you think sort of should be the consequences, if any, for Khabib sort of going forward?
Well, I say the same thing, but when Conor went wrong, right? I said the fans of Conor should give him a break. I mean, we all do stupid stuff, I said at the time, but he's going to have to pay for what he does, of course. It needs to go to court, it needs to go to the Athletic Commission, and whatever fine it is, well, he's going to have to pay that. You know, yeah, I would, for sure. But this is a guy who has been so clean his entire career, who never, you know, I mean, never heard anything about it. Everybody that I talked to, I met him at the Professional Fighters League when he was with the Abu Bakr. It's pretty much his brother. You know, it's his cousin, but they treat each other like brothers. And he was over there as well. He's a really great guy. You know, I think just McGregor has a way to get in people's heads, right? And that's why he's not doing it, because he wants to stir up that equilibrium, and he wants to make sure that they're going to, you know, be angry. And if they're angry, they're going to make mistakes. That's the whole setup here. It's very smart with what he's doing, but he should understand that, you know, some things you simply can't say. You can't start talking about family. You know, that's a bad one. About religion, I think that's a really bad one as well. It's almost like talking politics now here in America. It's the same thing. You can't say it because if somebody's from the other side, ooh, it's right away panic.
Yeah, it's crazy because we spoke about this in the lead up to all of McGregor's fights, for Diaz, for Mayweather, and of course for this one, and that's Conor McGregor's ability to get in people's heads and him willing to basically say and do anything to get in his opponent's head. Do you think going forward, Conor McGregor, excuse me, changes his approach in any way, maybe tapers things back? Because we saw there was that video released where in between rounds, he did say to Khabib, it's just business. And it kind of seemed like he was sort of letting Khabib know, hey man, you know, I didn't mean those things, which is an interesting thing to say in the middle of a fight.
Yeah, well, then he probably knew that he was fighting a much stronger guy than he thought he was. You know, and that was, and he could get really hurt. And maybe he said it because of that. I don't know. But I talked to somebody else, and who also has a friend who comes also from Dagestan. And he said this guy was so crazy. He was at the military base, and if there were 10,000 people, he said he fought 2,000, 3,000 of those guys. You know, he was just a crazy guy. He said, but they brought him to the big officer or wherever he had to go to, and the guy just looked at him and he was uncontrollable pretty much. The only thing the guy says, okay, let's call your father and mother. And he broke down completely. I mean, couldn't do became a little kid. That is the worst thing you can do to the mom and dad. Well, think about this, that Conor insulted his family as well. I mean, dude, if these guys, you heard about Khabib, what he said himself. You know, he says, oh, my dad's going to beat me up. Even Putin, Vladimir Putin said, please, on your son. You know, so it's a big offense. These are people also, if you come there, you look for help, they take you in your home. They're born with that. They have to do that. They're very caring for people, you know, and then especially the parents. Well, the parents are everything for them. And if you start insulting them, yeah, that's not a good idea. So that was a story I heard last weekend from somebody, and that gives you a little bit of a perspective how much they adore their parents over there. So stay away from family. Conor, do the same thing that you always did. He changed his game the last time. This is where he started doing the religion and everything and the terrorist thing, but he said, no, he shouldn't have gone there. Just go to the fighter. You can insult the fighter. We know this is going to happen. This is for selling pay-per-views. We kind of get it. Yeah, he does it really well, and it is really offensive. But, it's towards me. I don't really care about that. But once you start hitting religion and all that other stuff, I don't think it's a smart idea. So just keep on doing what you're doing. Go back to the old corner. Just insult the fighter. That's the only thing I'm saying.
What do you make of Khabib and his ultimatum to the UFC? Because he put out a big post on his Instagram and he said that unless the UFC sort of rehires his team, he won't be fighting for them. He'll fight somewhere else because he's loyal to his team. And, if one of them sort of is down, then all of them are down. If you're the UFC, what do you do in that situation? How do you sort of, I suppose, reconcile it? How would you approach that?
Well, I think now the storm is blown over, right? I mean, now they can think we're all human. The insults towards Khabib, that also automatically were insults to his family. And the family, his brothers, even if it's cousins, they all consider themselves brothers. We talk about this on the Professional Fighters League already 3-4 months ago when we were talking about Abu Bakr Nurmagomedov. It's a close-knit community. So, yes, of course, I can understand he jumps in and he suckers punch him. Again, completely wrong. You should never do that. But, man, it went really up. I always look at myself, and especially in the time when I was fighting, I would immediately, I think I would have done the same thing. I was just, if I would have taken every insult. You see, with me, in the preparation before that, I will start saying things back, and I know how to trigger certain things in people, and it will not be pretty as well. So then, we kind of balance it out. But imagine I would have taken it. I don't know what I would have done. I'm not in control of my emotions, right? And you're fighting. There's a lot of testosterone flying on. There's a lot of everything. You're an A-type personality. Everybody has that. So I can understand it. That's the only thing I'm saying. It's wrong. Of course it's wrong. But I can understand it. And for the UFC to right away to cut him out, especially after the things that Conor did before as well, even at the weigh-ins, throwing the bottles, all that stuff, I think they should be a little lighter. They should say, you know what? We looked at it again. It's a human reaction. We're only human. We can control our emotions.
Just quickly, because it seems like there's a bit of steam building towards a Floyd Mayweather-Khabib fight. I mean, what would your reaction be if something like that came to? Do you have any interest in seeing a boxing match between Khabib and Floyd Mayweather?
No, I don't. That's not Khabib's number. Not his forte. No. Yeah, he saw this and he says, "Oh, he hit Conor." But you also have to know that. Imagine, you're the better striker. You never expected, if you never saw him throwing punches like that, and you don't expect it, yeah, suddenly that's very effective when he comes in. Also mixing up takedowns with the punch on top. We saw happen with the Kevin Randleman and Mirko Cro Cop was the same thing. Mirko's a way better striker. Yeah, but there's the takedown. And he fakes the takedown and boom, suddenly comes over the top with the left, actually he did. But you see, so that doesn't mean he's a professional boxer. Conor can really box. He boxed, he did a lot of amateur boxing matches. He started boxing when he was 16 or 15, maybe even sooner. So he already knew how to box. I think that Khabib, I think his forte is wrestling and submissions. We all know that. So if Mayweather should step up, he should really step up. He should say, no, let's do it with takedowns. If you really want a big fight Nurmagomedov on MMA rules.
Goodness gracious.
That's what he said to McGregor. Well, Nurmagomedov doesn't kick anyway. Just let him punch. Let him use his takedown and submissions.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think a lot of people would tune in to see Floyd Mayweather get taken down and Khabib saying things to him on the floor as he submits him. Just quickly, before we move off the topic, if there was a rematch between Khabib and Conor, do you think it could go differently? Do you think McGregor could actually beat him? And also, who do you want to see next for Khabib?
That's a hard one. I'm not looking for a rematch right now. I think that Conor should fight a fight in between, and he should really need to brush up on his submission game. He simply has to. 4 losses, 4 submissions. Come on, man. This is the thing. After my 3rd submission loss, that was it for me. I said no more, and I started only doing ground. And it worked. I won my next 8 fights by submission suddenly. Actually have more submission victories than I have knockouts. It's just putting the work in. I don't know where his heart is. I think that Conor would be really good in boxing if he really only focuses. Imagine he starts training 2 times a day like he did for Mayweather, but now for a year, the whole year long, only 2 times a day, get really good professional boxers coming in, and then start boxing. Maybe that's a good thing for him to do as well. But to see a rematch? No, I don't know. Not now.
I think this Tony Ferguson versus Khabib fight, in an ideal world, that'll be the one that comes next, because a lot of people want to see it. Just got to ask sort of a little side note on UFC 229. Derrick Lewis had a pretty amazing performance, an amazing comeback win against Alexander Volkov, and then here he is being slotted against Daniel Cormier just, a couple of weeks later for UFC 230. What do you think about that fight being made and sort of Derrick Lewis stepping up on short notice after going through a pretty massive war against Volkov and now fighting for the heavyweight belt?
Yeah, Volkov, that's a big reach, and he has really good striking. That's not going to be Daniel Cormier. Cormier is actually going to be the smaller guy, I guess, in this fight. But Cormier is Cormier, man. He's going to be on you like a freaking wetsuit, and you cannot get him off. He's constantly attacking. Yeah, I don't see him win the fight, but dude, it's Derrick Lewis. It needs just one punch needs to connect, and if it connects, it's going to be over. And I saw him one time. I don't know, it was a bunch of fights ago, and he started out very light on his feet, like almost like a freaking welterweight. I mean, that light on his feet. I go, wow, can you imagine he has stamina for that kind of fighting for a couple of rounds? That could be very difficult for Cormier. But Cormier, I shouldn't say that, because Cormier, he will never fight. They will never fight here. Fight start, boom, he's there. That's it. And once you clinch with a guy, with that level of wrestling and that level of stamina, and we know that, of course, Lewis is a big guy and he does run out of gas, and he's never been pushed like he's going to get pushed against Cain Velasquez. I mean, Cain Velasquez is going to come for you, and he will, Cain Velasquez, Daniel Cormier is going to come for you, and he's going to constantly be in your face. To do 2 rounds of that, it's going to crush almost everybody. That's the same with Tony Ferguson we were just talking about. I would love to see the fight against him and Khabib, but because Ferguson, what an animal. I mean, if you hear them say they sometimes train 6 hours a day, dude, he brings it to a whole new level, But you see, that's what you need to do. That's Vinny Magalhaes, when we were talking about it, is doing the same. That's Josh Copeland. And those guys, they take it to the next level, because that's how you win fights. So, yeah, both those fights, I'm looking forward to it. But, yeah, the smart bet would, of course, be on Daniel Cormier.
And I want to quickly get your thoughts on Fedor's win. But before I do that, what do you make of Daniel Cormier being stripped of the light heavyweight title and John Jones fighting for it against Alexander Gustafsson? Do you think it was a fair decision by the UFC, or what did you think of that?
Oof, yeah, you know what? That comes as a surprise to me, because I've been traveling. I've been like in 6 states in the last 3 weeks. It's crazy for me. I don't know what I think about it. I think Daniel fights good at any weight, and a John Jones fight, I think it will be in his head. And I have a feeling that if Jones becomes the champion again, which he probably does, because he's a freak of nature. He's just a really good fighter. That's why I was always hoping for him to stay on the straight path, because if he does that, he can influence so many kids and other people, I made mistakes in my life. Now I'm going to show you what it is to be a good person. And he can do so much good with that. So I hope he stays on track, and that will happen. And then if he becomes the champion, I believe that Cormier, knowing Cormier, he probably wants to fight him again. Cormier is super competitive. We all know that. And, it's still good because he's still the heavyweight champion. So it doesn't really matter about it. I don't know what he said personally about it as well, but it's just very hard if you have 2 titles to defend both all the time. Some fighters are simply not going to get their fight if that happens. And I think that's the reason of the UFC, that they say, okay, you're fighting for the heavyweight title again. Let's take the light heavy title away. I assume that's the reason.
Obviously, got to get your thoughts on Fedor Emelianenko beating Chael Sonnen over the weekend. You mentioned you watched that fight. What did you think of that performance?
I was so amazed with Fedor. And I was amazed that Chael pulled off a double leg on him also. And he got him. But that first takedown, the first real takedown, when he take it down, and then, I don't know, it almost looked like Fedor made kind of a cartwheel kind of thing. And then he ended up on top. I've never seen that move. I go, dude, that was so slick what he did. And once he went to mount, I was already going to say, because I've seen that in Japan with Fedor, if you mount him, because, his torso is very high, so you don't sit completely on him. It's harder to base your legs out because he's got a really high torso. It's harder to find your base, so to say, and he's really good with escaping there. And once he ended up in the guard, I go, oh, now we're going to see Fedor Nogueira, right? and all the way in the beginning, the Fedor with his ground and pound, so sick from the guard, doing it from being in somebody's guard. But then, of course, he passed, and we saw what happened there. I think he looked really good. I think that Chael didn't look bad at all. Used his striking to set up the takedowns. It was very smart to just keep on going for the takedowns. Of course, it was the only option he had. But the second option is that the reason is that Chael he's always comes in shape. He wants to train hard, and he surprised a lot of people with that. And I think that was his game plan. Even if it doesn't work, keep attacking. Hopefully he can get him tired and get some of that power away in the second or the third round. And obviously he never went to a second round. He looked really good to me. Fedor looked like the man. But then again, if you put him against a great striker who's a great wrestler as well, you see, then he's getting really tested again. On the feet, he didn't really get tested, but he got tested in the wrestling department. That's for sure.
I mean, just quickly, it's going to be him versus Ryan Bader. It would be hard to pick against Ryan Bader just because Ryan is sort of in the prime of his career and is looking better than ever. But, who do you think would win that fight?
Yeah, it's a hard one. For Fedor, you have to understand also it's kind of redemption for him, right? Losing to Mitrione, and then Bader beat Mitrione, and now he's fighting Bader. So in his mind, he goes, if I beat him, I beat the guy who beat Mitrione. So I think that if he already trained hard, which he does, I think he's going to step it up. He's going to go extremely crazy. He knows that he's at the end of his career. He wants to come off stop his career with a win, of course, with a series of wins, preferably. So it's going to be a badass Fedor. But then again, Ryan Bader, man, he looked phenomenal against Mitrione. He completely shut him down. Now, I don't know if he can keep that. Mitrione doesn't have any real ground experience as for a wrestler. It's like with me. They take me down and they be on top of me. A wrestler is very hard for me to get up. I need to go for submissions. But if they're in the guard, there's not a lot. In the side mount, there's not a lot. In the half guard, there's not a lot. You can go for a leg, but if they don't put the foot up, don't step on the foot, there's no leg lock. You see, there's so much the finesse right now in these days. Everybody is so good in what they do. Oh, it's a hard fight. I really don't. I really don't know who will win that. I would say if it goes to like the third round, then Bader. I see him because he's younger and he looks really good lately, and maybe because he's in better shape then, because since he's younger, he might take it to Fedor. But otherwise, you have to understand also this. I'm coming from Pride Fighting Championships, like the Fedor he always was, and it's very hard to unsee that in your mind. Because the guy is such a powerhouse. The things they did, I mean, Randleman, when he dropped him on his head and then he just armbars him, he gives him Kimura right after. I mean, it's insane. The guy just stays so calm, and he looked like he was in great shape in this fight as well. So I don't know. That was my own prediction. I would think Fedor early on. If it goes to a stoppage, and have past 3 rounds, I think that Brian might get it.
And I think that's a great point by you. I think Ryan Bader is a big Fedor fan. So I wonder if when he gets in the ring with him, it might be a little bit too much fighting a legend and a guy like Fedor, and if that affects the fight. Bas, we really appreciate your time. As we wrap up, I just want to quickly mention, obviously, the World Bare Knuckle Fighting Federation is going to have a massive event with Chris Lieben, Johnny Hendricks. And I noticed you sort of shared it on your social media. So before we wrap up, I just really sort of wanted to mention it, let people know about it, and just quickly get a couple of comments from you about, are you involved in this one, and sort of are you excited for this event? It looks like it's got a lot of really cool names on it.
I'm super excited for this. I think that that this is going to be a really good show, and yes, I am very much involved. I'm the president of the company.
Oh wow! Speaking of a president, we didn't realize this. Hall of Famer, former champion, and a president now.
Mr. President.
It's amazing. Add that on checklist the things that are happening. Dude, it's going to be crazy. I mean, Johnny Hendricks, Brennan Ward. I mean, that's going to be a crazy fight. Brennan Ward's an incredible striker, really good. We got Chris Lieben and then Baroni, Lieben, trust me, and everybody's saying, oh, he had this. We tested everything. We made sure 100% that this guy is all okay in his head. He had a whole bunch of tests done, and it's all okay. Because trust me, otherwise he wouldn't be fighting. We wouldn't have allowed him to fight. So that's a really cool one. I'm looking forward to Sean Merriman, the linebacker, the football player, who had this guy who was 265 pounds. It's like, 4 feet vertical leap, something like that. Wow. That's a crazy athlete. And of course, he fights Mike Burke, and then Mike Burke doesn't have the greatest record, but he has been fighting. If Burke had like 26 fights, I believe, winning and losing all together combined, it's still 26 fights more than Merriman had. So, sometimes people go like, oh, he's going to just walk him over because he's not a good fighter. But people at home don't understand that even the fighters here, if you're a top 100 fighter, you at home will have no chance against that top 100 fighter because they're professional fighters. It's what they do every day, single day, 2 times a day, preferably. So it's going to be very hard for Merriman, but he's a freak, also a freak athlete. So I'm really looking forward to that fight. We have a ladies fight, whole bunch of good fights. We have an 8-man tournament going on, not in one night. We're spreading it out over a few shows. So it's going to be more fair, so to say, that if you have an injury, you don't have to carry it on to your next fight. You're going to have time to rest. And I'm looking forward to that tournament as well. So, yeah, I truly believe it's going to be a really great show. The production is going to be insane. We have a really good producer. It's not going to be unlike you've seen before. I can say it's like the UFC level what we're going to do. I mean, wow. What is it? Mayweather and Pac-Man. We have the same producer.
Wow.
So, yeah, we put the gears up because we knew that, if we want to come up and we want to make it right, we're going to have we need the good people for it. And that's where we spent the money on a really great production.
That's crazy. And just quickly, as we let you go, Bas, what made you want to sign on as president?
Well, what happened was somebody asked me also to be the president of a new MMA organization. There's so many out there. Didn't really feel like it. It's very hard. UFC is so big. Even Bellator has trouble with bouncing up against them, and they have Viacom behind them. They make so much money, it's insane. Then Karate Combat came. Hey, Karate Combat, I love that, bringing karate back in a full contact version. Yes, sign me up. I'm the ambassador for the organization. And now suddenly they ask me, hey, do you want to be a commentator? We do anything to have you as a commentator. I say, you will do anything. Yeah. Well, I'd like to actually be involved in that then. I said, because I think that people would find this very interesting. And for the people at home, I just have to say that also, because First, I'd let them wait. I went online and I started Googling about it. And I always say, don't believe me, just Google about it. Is bare knuckle boxing safer than boxing? And you'll find out all the testing that you find, yeah, it is safer than boxing. And people are going to freak out. But we all know this because we went through this with the MMA. The glove is invented to protect the hand, right? We all know this, but a lot of people at home don't know this. They think it's to protect the head of the opponent. No, it's not. So what happens is, in the early days when boxing started, it was bare knuckle. But then a champion, for instance, would win his fight, but he would break his hand. Now he couldn't defend the title for 3-4 months, maybe even 6 months, because he was out for a long time. So that's why they came up with the idea to have a boxing glove, because now they can actually hit way harder to the head, as hard as they want, because nothing is going to happen to the hand. So if you take that away, believe it or not, the good bare knuckle boxers, they hit literally 50-40% to the head with power, because they're all afraid to break their hands. They hit the shoulders, they hit the forearms, they hit the meaty parts of and of course, they go for the stuff that I really like, the body. Your lacerations, of course, you're going to see all that, but you're going to see CTE effects like you have in boxing or in kickboxing maybe even. No, you're not going to see that. Hopefully, you're not going to see it. Can a punch be really hard one time on the jaw? Of course, it can happen. Can there be more cuts? Of course, there's going to be more cuts. There's a competition from us. And he had, from his last time, and it was like 14 fights or 15 fights, was 1 broken hand and 1 knockout in all the fights. And the rest, you got a cut here, you got a cut there. We have doctors in the backstage. We actually have plastic surgeons for the guys. Wow. Because we want to spend the extra money for it, so that if they do get cut, that they have a plastic surgeon taking care of them backstage and making sure that wound is not going to be showing up too bad. Then again, for what I understand, that's a saying, right? Chicks dig scars, right? That's what they said when you were a kid. So, for a guy, it's not that bad. For the women fights, yeah, I would love them to stay pretty, of course. So That's the reason. Then I called him back, and then because I knew already, somebody told me about it. But when I found out that it will cause less CTE for the brain than you do have in boxing or in Thai boxing, I say, yeah, okay. Then I would like to do it. Now it's just about informing the people, and hopefully they can understand it. Now, if you don't like blood, don't buy the pay-per-view, because, yeah, you're going to see that cuts will happen.
Well, I'll tell you what, that is going down live on pay-per-view November 9th at 10 p.m. EST, 7 p.m. PST. And, of course, that is in a different day. That is a day. Wait, are we later or earlier, Casper? I'm really completely.
We're in the future.
We're in the future.
If
That's
it's November
10th.
9th, it's going to be the 10th here, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice afternoon, morning here in Australia, which everybody will enjoy. So check that out. That's Brennan Ward versus Big Rig, Johnny Hendricks. You got Chris Lieben versus Phil Baroni. So many great fights. And I actually agree with you, Bas. I think it actually brings a different level of excitement and interest to the fights. It definitely is something fun and exciting for people to check out. And the production value is going to be great, so you can't miss out. And, of course, follow the great man, the president himself, on Instagram and Twitter at Bas Rutten MMA. The Bas Rutten O2 trainer, of course, fantastic. Pick it up to get ready for summer in Australia, and receptornaturals.com/Bas-Rutten for your CBD oil. Bas, thank you so much for coming onto the program. We can't wait to see how this event goes down. And, of course, no doubt about it, we'll have you back on to discuss it once it's done. Thank you so much for your time.
Perfect. And the next Saturday, PFL, Professional Fighters League in D.C.
Yes.
Check it out. Also, NBCSN.
Thank you so much, Bas. Always appreciate it, man. Have a great one.
All right, bro. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This is TJ Dillashaw, UFC champ. Listen to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, now that we're back in Australia after a dynamite trip up to UFC 229, we think back to the memories and the highlights of the trip. And there's no doubt about it, while Khabib and Conor sort of got some headlines around the world, the big moment of the week was the MMA media coming together for the first live Backstreet Boys, Backstreet's Back performance at Dino's Off the Strip dive bar. And I have Hunter Homostek from Flow Combat, Anthony Walker from Sherdog, and James Lynch from every single outlet that's created by on God's green earth here on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, Backstreet is definitely back here on Submission Radio. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, man. Appreciate y'all having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hunter's like, yeah, whatever. We were a couple of minutes late in calling him, and I'm pretty sure Hunter might be pulling out of the boy band. So quickly, James, I'll go with you first. I want you to set the scene for the people at home. And by the way, if you guys haven't seen the video, we'll share it again. There's some definite classic moves from James as we break down that song. Take the people into the moment before we got on stage when you found out we'd be doing this Backstreet's Back performance in front of I want to say packed Dino's. I think a few people went home. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning at that point. But we had some hardcore fans in the front doing the shooting and sort of singing along with us.
Yeah, what I didn't realize at the time is that we were making history, right? Like, there's been no MMA media people to do a karaoke together. So that in itself, I didn't realize the impact we were having on this industry when we were about to do this. So I'm in the bar. Hunter says we're going to do a song. I look at the sheet and I ask him, what did he pick? And he says, Backstreet's Back. Now, this is a great song for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, Halloween is right across the corner. Great Halloween song. Number 2, I happen to know the lyrics to the song, so I figured it was a good opportunity for us to, not only make history, but also just, show off some skills that you wouldn't see just from being on the camera and doing interviews. Some of us have some vocals, as Casper showed in his Dr. Dre rap there.
Yeah, you can hear the dogs barking in the background. They're like, we disagree. The vocals were I think at that point, we all kind of like half lost our voices. Mine's still recovering. But I guess, Hunter, you deserve all the credit in the world for bringing everyone together and choosing the song. What made you want to go with Backstreet's Back?
Well, actually,
it's a no-brainer.
Or did I get it wrong?
I was just going to say.
Choose the song? Did Hunter give away fake credit on the show? Or did someone tell us terrible writing?
I got your back. I got your back, Dennis.
Oh, you got to give me the credit I deserve.
I was about to do it. I was about to toss it off like a good friend does. So we did walk up together. To be fair, it was me and you together walking up there, but you suggested Backstreet's Back. You gazed deep into my eyes, and I gave you a single head nod. And we knew right then that was the song, that was it. And sure enough, I mean, did we crush it or did we crush it? I mean, I don't know how you can do much better than that for being drunk, late night karaoke on fight week. What more can you possibly expect? James's moves, I don't know, man. We need to set a poll. James Lynch versus Tony Ferguson, better movement. I don't know. It's close.
That's tough, man.
Can I just say as well as we discuss movement, Anthony Walker, who not only did an amazing job with Backstreet's Back, in the MMA media performance, but before that did a good solid 3 or 4 performances on his own at Dino's. Anthony, just go through a little bit of a list of the songs that you did for the fine people there at Dino's and give us a little bit of an insight behind the dance moves that we saw, because you were a little bit like a Tony Ferguson flying around the stage and making people sort of amazed at the movement.
I mean, straight up and down. I'm first of all, I'm just a fly motherfucker. I mean, that's just put out there.
Obviously,
but no, really, man. I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I think I did. I did a John Legend song, "Used to Love You." And then I did I do a Prince song. No, I did George Michael, Faith also. So I like to just switch it up on them because I had the Public Enemy shirt on. Obviously I wear my blackness just loud and proud, whatnot. But I like to switch it up on them, throw a White Boy Jam in there just to confuse people, let them know I'm versatile. I can do a lot of different things, man. But we had a blast up at Dino's, man. So if you are in Las Vegas and you don't want the corporate strip, you don't want the $16 whiskeys, go ahead to Dino's, get that $2 PBR and just live it up with some of the locals, man. That's a great time.
Yeah, it was absolutely unbelievable. I did Rocket Man. I thought the song was actually Tiny Dancer. I got my songs mixed up. I got up on the stage, and from the support of my good people like Anthony, like Casper, I had no voice. So I pulled up the security guard from the UFC 229 weigh-ins and made him sing along with me. And also another guy, it was like some punk rock guy who told me he hasn't had any beer yet, so he needed to get off stage. But I wouldn't let him go, guys. I wouldn't let him go because I knew it was going to add to the performance. Quickly, let's talk about UFC 229 Fight Week as a whole. Anthony, I'll start off with you. You did a fantastic job. Obviously, Sherdog.com. Everybody needs to check out your articles, the good, the bad, the ugly. I checked out. It was a fantastic way to sort of break down a week which had a lot of good, bad, and ugly in it. From your perspectives, what were some of the highlights for you during the UFC 229 Fight Week?
I mean, I would definitely say being there for the brawl was a highlight as far as our careers as journalists, just to be there for moments like that, but definitely not a highlight as far as my personal feelings toward, what was otherwise an incredible week of MMA at its absolute finest. I mean, I think Derrick Lewis takes the cake for the week. Derrick Lewis just absolutely owned every moment that he had that microphone in front of him. Not only did he put on a performance that will definitely come up in our year-end discussions of Fight of the Year and Comeback of the Year and Knockout of the Year. I mean, he put a post-fight speech on that was so beautiful that we forgot about that. I mean, the guy definitely stood out to the point where, hey, now he's got a title shot that he ironically said he didn't want immediately after the fight. But it's such a cool turnaround to see that happen. Also, I think Tony Ferguson was a big winner of the week. I mean, he was my personal favorite as far as the open workouts and some of the pre-fight stuff. Just his persona, he was just himself, and he was himself in every way, shape, and form. And throwing out the workout gear after his open workout performance, and then putting on a show like that after 5 months removed from having his LCL torn completely off the bone. It's really just a shame that the brawl happened, so now that we're not talking about how good Tony Ferguson was.
And are people watering their plants more since they've come back after dealing with Tony Ferguson? Has he made you guys sort of look at your plant dealing styles?
Man, I mean, watching what Tony Ferguson did, you gotta question a lot of things in your life. You gotta question your motivation, man. You get a splinter and you hurt your little fingers, like, oh man, I'm hurt, I can't do X, Y, and Z. This man he had a ligament torn off the bone, and then he went out and finished Anthony Pettis. That's just not normal. First of all, finishing Anthony Pettis, I mean, granted, it was a corner stoppage, but when have we seen Anthony Pettis get finished? Like, that just doesn't happen. I think Max Holloway is probably the only person to do it. So he did that from nearly being handicapped. I'm sorry, man. That's Superman performance right there.
I love what you said about Derrick Lewis and his performance. And it's funny, hat tip to Sean Sheen, because before that fight, I think he tweeted something to the effect of, coming up next, Derrick Lewis finds a way to win a fight he has no business winning. So at this point, I think we're going to see a new heavyweight champion, the way Derrick Lewis sort of keeps on making these miraculous comebacks. James, what about you, man? What was sort of some of the highlights for you? Because you've covered a lot of these events now. Where does this one sort of rank for you?
Yeah, it's definitely up there. You know, it was funny, as this fight was going along, I was thinking, this is one of the first events I've covered where nothing bad has happened. And then, of course, we get to the main event, and Khabib, does his best Mortal Kombat kick across the screen impression, jumping out and going after Dylan Dennis. But I still thought that this was one of the cards of the year. I thought Ferguson and Pettis was one of the fights of the year as well, too. I'm glad Anthony brought up Derrick Lewis. I think he really stole the show, and I'm glad that the UFC is seeing lightning in a bottle and using him as a challenger to come out, and fight Daniel Cormier here. Just to me, I think just the overall card just had a little bit of everything. It had, finishes on the undercard. It had, Aspen Ladd, who, everyone was talking about her weight. She makes weight. She goes out there and puts on a vintage performance against a really tough opponent in Tanya Evinger. To me, it's just, there's a lot of things that we can look at outside the Khabib stuff and really just sort of, this will always be a fight card that I'll remember just because of the fact that it's really just, there's so many good performances on this card, and I'm not going to let one Mortal Kombat move sort of take away from that.
Mortal Kombat move. I love it. I love the way you always bring video games into everything, James.
Yeah,
just a classic. Hunter, Floyd Combat. And you, by the way, James, you and Hunter sort of worked together on this trip. So, Hunter, what was it like working with James? And are there any sneaky stories that happened between you two that we didn't really quite find out about that you can reveal here on the program?
I wish I had a sneaky James Lynch story, but the best thing I got is that he's a veteran drinker. Because we're all hungover after the karaoke night, right? Feeling like shit the next morning. And James gets into his suitcase like a drug dealer, pulls out this bottle slowly. He's like, "Here's what you need to fix that." And I'm like, "What is this? You're like the Resident Evil merchant, like about to sell me something here. I don't know what's going on." He has these activated charcoal tablets that he swears by. And I've heard him talk about these before, but I never actually took them. And I swear to God, you guys need to go to Amazon right now and buy activated charcoal, because that was like the hangover cure. Because that was, we went to Dina's the night before the fights. So I was kind of worried. I'm like, man, I don't want to have to go to the event feeling like shit. I popped 2 or 3 of those. Perked me right up. So Lynch showed off his true veteran stat. You can rely on that guy for anything. Anything. You need an interview, he's got the interview. You need a hangover cure, he's got that. Lynch is just the man. So, just to echo what you guys said, though, on the week, I feel exactly the same way. That card was incredible. That was headed towards, a card of the year in my eyes. The way everything was panning out, even the undercard was great. You had Scott Holtzman, Vicente Luque, huge finishes. Michelle Watterson becomes a contender. And then all we're talking about is the brawl. So it was disappointing on that level that it did definitely kind of taint the event. But it's MMA, man. You got to use the word taint lightly. Did it really taint it? Did it really ruin it? Or did it just elevate it to an even more legendary status? And I think as time goes by, we're just going to find that it just defined it and it really elevated it. So as gross as it is, and as much as people want to call it disgusting and whatnot, a lot more eyeballs were on that card than any other card in history. And, I run all of Flow Combat social media, and I'm really dialed into those metrics. And the metrics definitely agree with that the eyeballs were on that card like few others. So there is a good in that bad.
And I'm just curious, Hunter, Khabib after the fight put a bit of an ultimatum towards the UFC. Hire my boys or I'm going to go elsewhere. If you're the UFC right now, how do you handle the situation? If they had to bring Hunter in to fix things up, how would you handle it?
I would make Khabib happy. They got something there. They got something there, especially after all this goes down. Everybody's saying that, Khabib had his moment to really become a star and he ruined it. Like, that's like, did he really ruin it though? Did he? I think he actually elevated his status there, and I think he came off as a more popular fighter. That was kind of the knock on him. We didn't know, can Khabib carry a pay-per-view on his own as the main event? Can he be that A-list, that A-side star? And I think now he's got plenty of momentum to do that. Beating Conor alone, let's not forget what he did to Conor in the fight itself. That alone is going to raise his stock. But then everything after just got so many more eyes on him. I bet a lot more people can spell his name now, so that's huge, So overall, I feel, obviously I see the disgusting side, but at the same time, I can't help but think that this is ultimately going to work out for the UFC.
I think it's that Conor McGregor effect here as well. Not to take anything away from Khabib, because he's a star in his own ranks. But we saw that with Nate Diaz, where he became such a bigger star after beating Conor McGregor, and we're seeing that with Khabib. We're seeing his name pop up all over the place. 50 Cent is making him offers in Bellator that I don't even know if he's authorized to do. You've got Floyd Mayweather sort of promoting Khabib. I don't for one second think this fight will ever happen, nor do I ever want to see that. But, you know, Floyd's kind of getting in on the fun. He's getting his own name out there. They're going back and forth. What do you make of all of that, James? And ultimately, what do you think should be next for Khabib? You know, if it doesn't end up being a rematch with Conor McGregor, because obviously that's sort of the lucrative one to make.
A lot of people are going to disagree with me here. I think the Khabib and Floyd Mayweather talk is really annoying because I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Disagree with you? What do you mean disagree with you? We hate it, James. We hate it. It burns our souls.
Well, just making sure because I've seen mixed reviews on social media, so I'm just playing my cards here. But in general,
it's smart for Khabib to do that, right? Just to get his name out there, different markets. Maybe some people who are Mayweather fans who have no idea who Khabib is are like, who's this guy? Checking him out now.
Yeah, no, I get it from that perspective. It just sucks in a way because there's other good stuff going on in MMA right now. You know me, I'm always kind of the glass half full guy as far as everything outside of the tabloids and stuff. So it would be good to see some other coverage. But I get it, and if it's good for Khabib and he gets more of a payday, that's great. To answer your second question, what's next for him? I really think Tony Ferguson is next. You know, a lot of people are kind of doubting that with the fact that, you know, people are like, you got to do the rematch now. But I wonder if the UFC's a little hesitant on that, just with the fact they saw what happened to Ronda Rousey when she lost to Holly Holm. They gave her Amanda Nunes. She lost. Ronda Rousey's out of the UFC. And I'm not saying Conor would do that. He'd leave or anything like that. But they got to be careful with Conor McGregor here because I think ultimately, whatever his next fight is, if that's Diaz, if it's someone else, you want it to be a fight that he has a good chance of winning. And I think seeing what they saw in that fight, I don't think there is a good chance that McGregor wins the rematch, and that would be 2 straight losses. That would be hard on his career. So I think Ferguson is more of what's going to end up happening. And Dana White himself, and I know you guys are going to say, oh, you know, Dana White, he says a lot of things, but he really seems to be leaning more towards the Ferguson fight, and I think that's what will end up happening. They just have to bubble wrap the guys before the fight in order for it to work.
You know what? I think a great point made by you. I think if I'm the UFC right now, I'm really looking at this Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor fight as well, because Nate doesn't have a fight now. You know, it's something you can make money off, and maybe Conor can get a win and then fight Khabib, but who knows what happens next. Anthony, as we wrap up, I want you to let the good people know what's coming up on Sherdog, and also, if you had to choose which member of the Backstreet Boys you would be, give us a name. Who do you think is the Anthony doppelganger in the Backstreet Boys?
You know what? I actually have no idea what any of their names are in Backstreet Boys, but I think we should call ourselves the Backfist Boys.
Ooh,
a lot more
yes.
So what's coming up on Sherdog? I've got the Trenches. It's our new live chat. That's going to be Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time that we're going to do that, myself and Jason Burgos. So Friday, I will have the mailbag column called Ask Ant. That should be available. There are no major fights going on this weekend. We've got Cage Warriors and LFA, but I won't be doing any post-fight columns on that. But other than that, you can just find me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA, and check out my author page on Sherdog.com as well.
One of the biggest rising stars in the MMA game, and also what a great guy behind the scenes. Now, Hunter, I know Flow Combat's got some amazing stuff going on. Not only do you guys cover all the big events, but you have a lot of great local events that people can watch and check out as well. So break it down for us. What's coming up on Flow Combat that people have to check out? And also, which Backstreet Boys person are you?
I'll tackle the second question first. I think I'm oh shit, is he NSYNC? Dude, I was gonna say Joey Fatone. He's NSYNC, isn't he?
That's NSYNC.
Shit.
Yeah.
I'm like he's a ginger, so obviously that's my guy, you know. So shit. Who's NSYNC? Nick Carter, Aaron Carter. Which one of the Carter brothers is Backstreet Boys?
Yeah, I want to say Nick. There's AJ. There's Howie D. There's Kevin. None of them have surnames. Yeah,
I think it's Nick. Nick's like the Conor McGregor of the Backstreet Boys. You know, he gets a lot of the limelight, but does he deserve it? You know.
Yeah, that's not really
Kevin, our grade one talent.
That's not really me. So you said somebody's named Howie. I gotta assume Howie's kind of the unassuming one of the group with a name like Howie. Yeah. So I'm going Howie. You know, I'll fly that Howie flag all day. I'll take that one. But as far as Flow Combat coming up, man, you nailed it. You know, we always have live events. This Saturday, there's V3 Fight 70, and V3 Fights is like they've launched a lot of careers. Chase Sherman's come through there. Devontae Smith has come through there, just signed with the UFC. Joe Lowry was just on Dana White Contender Series. So V3, Bobby Moffitt just signed with the UFC as well, all on V3 Fights. And like there was actually a Dana White looking for a fight card based on that last V3 Fights card where a lot of those guys came from. So V3 Fights, man, if you're even remotely interested in prospects, it's a great, great place to see prospects come up. So we got V3 Fights then, and then we got Joe Giannetti, who a lot of people remember from The Ultimate Fighter Undefeated. He was a finalist on there. He's coming back November 3rd for Cage Titans. And Cage Titans is like the New England V3 Fight. So it kind of controls all the New England prospects to a degree. A lot of guys. Manny Bermudez just came out of there. He's 2-0 in the UFC now. So Joe Giannetti's looking for a big win in the main event there and trying to get back to the UFC. So that's a really exciting storyline there too, man. So Flo keeps me busy with them live events, as Lynch knows well.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the great thing is for everybody who hasn't checked it out, like you mentioned, so many great live events. And if you're a big fan of MMA, why not just sort of put it on in the background, just enjoy your weekend. And those fights are sometimes way more exciting than some of the UFC cards that we see. So many great fights and young guys sort of trying to rise up the ranks. And that's where you see all the crazy stuff happen. So check that out. And of course, you mentioned him, James Lynch, who covers the sport for, is it every single outlet now?
Almost
James,
everyone,
You
yeah.
have a couple more to cross off the list. What's coming up for you? Obviously, you've got amazing interviews. You cover the sport for all the big websites. What's coming up that people can check out?
Well, keep it short because I do work for a lot of sites. So I don't want to, make this podcast another hour. But just Hunter mentioned it there. We talked about Joe Giannetti. I got an interview with him up on Flow Combat. I interviewed Andrea Lee, who's going to be fighting again for one championship for the title. Got an interview with her up on Flow Combat. And then on Fightful, you can check out my interviews with Anthony Smith and Volkan Ozdemir. They're going to be headlining UFC Moncton next weekend. So check those out. And you didn't ask me about the Backstreet Boy thing, which is good because I don't think
No. We got to get it. What is it?
Okay, well, I would say probably AJ. But to be honest, there's two UFC fighters that have doppelgangers in the Backstreet Boys. AJ is Tony Ferguson, and Nick is Marvin Vittori. Go check it out. There's a lot of lookalikes there. But, guys, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun. And
it's a lot of fun. And as we wrap this up, are we putting this out to fighters only? Next MMA awards get opened up. The 2019 World MMA Awards. There's only one opening act for this, guys, and that is the Backfist Boys, featuring Anthony Walker, James Lynch, Hunter Homestack, Kasper Oslowski, Dennis Crowder. Let's do this, guys. Fighters only. What are you waiting for? Our calendar is open right now. Boys, I think we can negotiate a fair fee that's not going to sort of make the show go out of business. $10,000, $20,000 each is all we ask for, and I think we can do this. What do you guys think?
I'm in.
I say book it, man.
Hey,
you guys already operated on McGregor time today, so you're clearly ready for that big payday.
As long as Anthony doesn't jump off the stage and attack anyone in the crowd, we should be fine. Guys, thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on to Submission Radio. Always so much fun talking to you guys.
Of course.
Hey, take
Peace,
care,
guys.
man.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Well, there you go, guys. Officially dubbed the Backfist Boys, featuring Oscar Willis. I feel like we got to give Oscar Willis a shout out, who was also
Danny.
there, and Danny, yeah,
who's
of
our
course.
manager.
Danny Austin, our manager, who introduced us to the amazing treats of Ellis Island, where you can get a crazy barbecue feast for like $17 and avoid the stinging prices of the Las Vegas Strip, and $2 beers. I mean, if you wanna see the MMA media on Fight Week, Ellis Island, I think we'll be living there next time.
Oh, absolutely. Dollar roulette as well. Another great quick story was when all the MMA media put all their money on one color on the roulette and everybody lost their money together. It was a poetic way to go.
Bonding experience.
Dozens and dozens of dollars were lost. So pretty much everybody's pay for the trip was gone. But no, it was a fantastic time. And if you guys want to check out the Backfist Boys opening up the World MMA Awards, you got to tweet at Fighters Only. Make sure that they get us on. Again, the fee won't be too bad, and I've been preparing some dance moves. I know that Anthony Walker's got some as well. So, and James Lynch, I mean, he's just worth the price of admission alone. So make sure to check him out, and also make sure to follow all those guys and support the MMA media stuff. They've got a lot of great content coming out in the next few weeks. They always do. And as we wrap up the show, big thanks to Tai Tuivasa, Bas Rutten, Dave Meltzer, and you guys for tuning into Submission Radio. It's been fun to come back.
Just quickly. To cut off your awesome wrap up, I just remembered because got to get this in there before we cut the lights and the Power to Submission Radio officers. A really quick review, Venom. I don't know if you've seen it, Dennis. This is totally.
I have. I watched it the day when we came back.
Okay, good. So it won't be a solo review. You can tell me what you think. I thought it was the shittest movie I have seen in probably the last decade. And we've seen things like Justice League. We've seen things like the Superman movies. We've seen things like The Room with Tommy Wiseau. I mean, all those movies look like Inception compared to Venom. I thought it was absolutely terrible. I thought it was super rushed. I thought Tom Hardy, I love Tom Hardy. He's a great actor. He couldn't even save this movie. There's this, it was just silly. It was like I was waiting for clown music to start playing in the background. It was that slapstick. It was that silly. I was hoping it would be kind of dark and sort of add layers to the Venom character. And I think there was just, it was too fast, and there wasn't really any character building here. I'm giving it -5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. I know our scale goes from 0 to 5. I'm giving it -5. I thought it was absolutely dreadful.
Lowest. That's the lowest score in the history of Timothy Johnson mustaches that we've seen given on Submission Ready. Yeah, I watched it. It's a funny one because like I'm really harsh on movies, but with this one, I didn't think. Look, it was terrible, but I didn't think it was as terrible. Like I didn't find it as terrible as you did, but. I don't know. I like Tom Hardy and I like the Venom character, so I think part of me was just happy just to see it on the big screen. I don't know. And I think it was like an afternoon movie session. We had just come back from a great week in Las Vegas, so I was in a good mood.
It must be the jet lag. It must be the jet lag.
Maybe it's the jet lag.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll give it 1 out of 5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. The thing with this one is it's kind of like, and this is the problem, it's like Sony was looking to create that Marvel humor while also trying to sort of make it serious, and it's just
they shouldn't do that.
They've kind of hit the DC thing where it's like it's just really tough to do. So I don't know what they're going to do with this, because I think there's going to be a Carnage movie coming out as well or something, so I'm not sure. I think there's some news broke about that, so it's going to be interesting to see how they can bounce back from that one and what they do with Tom Hardy, who's effectively now removed from the Marvel universe. If you really think about it, he can't really play any other characters. That's what I love about Matt Damon's cameo in the Thor movie. He just decided to do a cameo, effectively sort of removing himself from ever playing a Marvel character, really. So it's awesome. But
and Brad Pitt in Deadpool. How good was that?
Brad Pitt in Deadpool, yeah. Oh, so good. I love it. So yeah, it was definitely disappointing. I wonder what they're going to do with the character next. I wonder how this Carnage thing's going to work out. And it's just really sad because I know, like yourself, I'm a massive Venom fan as well. So it's just crazy how they just can't make it work in movies second time around. So did you think it was better than Spider-Man 3 or on the same level?
I think I enjoyed Spider-Man 3 more. I remember, but bear in mind, I haven't seen Spider-Man 3 in like 10 years, and I remember walking out of the cinema then going like, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. I think Spider-Man 3 had the Sandman in it, right?
I think so.
I think, because there was like a million bad guys. There was a Sandman, there was Venom, I think there was someone else. I think Green Goblin came back or something, I don't know. But I remember like there was some really touching moments with the Sandman where you kind of felt his pain. And here, like, I felt nothing. I just thought, this is so stupid. And it's just like, it's just funny because, like, obviously Venom, the story is with the symbiote attaching itself to Eddie Brock. And it's like, the symbiote has this one plan. And then at one point in the movie, it just completely abandons that plan and does a 180. And there's basically no reason for it.
No reason
it's basically like, I was going to do this, but you know what? I changed my mind and now I'm going to do that. Like that, if that's not lazy storytelling, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I didn't like the bad guy. They're nothing against that guy. I forgot what his name is. I don't want to remember it because I don't want him to get too sad when he listens to this. But
never even knew it.
Wasn't a fan of him, and I don't know. They should have had a better bad guy. But there you guys go. A terrible movie, but a fun episode of Submission Radio. It's great to be back here in Melbourne, Australia. Another episode of Submission Radio coming at you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Have a safe week and be safe, and we'll catch you next week.